Oh, hi, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Jennifer here from Gals, Ghosts, and Ladies. And we're so glad that you're joining us this afternoon for pie and coffee. I got my favorite coffee mug. Um, and just as a little aside, in comments, post a picture in this live stream of your favorite creepy coffee mug, and we'll vote, and somebody will win a prize tonight on who's got the best creepy coffee mug. So post a picture. So if you are watching on Facebook and YouTube, I thank you very much. If you're watching at a later time, I thank you very much for that as well. As I've said before, there's so many live streams and podcasts that I want to watch and listen to and follow, and I just never have the time. So what I do, and I would encourage you to do that with my live streams, because they are all available on Facebook and YouTube, is to watch them at a later time. I don't have a lot of graphics. It's mostly just me talking. So put it on in the background and listen while you're doing some housework, while you're sweeping the floor, while you're putting your makeup on. That's when I tend to try to catch up on podcasts and live streams that I don't have time to watch at the moment. There's some people I really try to support out there, and I just can't get to all of them. So anyways, even watching me at a later time really helps, and I thank you for that very much. Let's see. I want to remind folks that, my banner down below, we are live from Lizzie Lou Studios. If you've been watching, you do know that Lizzie Lou Studio, the name of the studio, I had to come up with a good name. It's very special to me. Louise is my middle name, and Lizzie is my cousin Michelle's middle name. And as I talk about frequently on this live stream, me and Michelle go way back. We're cousins, but we're been best friends straight out of the womb. Really, we've been best friends forever, and it's almost like I'm her older sister and she's my younger sister, and that's the kind of relationship we have. But the reason why Lizzie, Michelle's middle name, is in the name of my studio is because, as you've heard me say before, I do these live streams because of Michelle. Michelle asked me to do one on her dad, and I did, and I really fell in love with it. So I took her middle name to name my studio, Lizzie Lou Studios. So as always, thank you, Michelle. And I'm gonna close that ticker out. I'll probably run it again later. So this particular ticker live from Lizzie Lou Studio. So if you are watching, drop us a comment. Let me know who's watching, where you're from, what's going on. How was your Thanksgiving? I literally went from the dinner table to right here. So even though the name of this live stream is Pie and Coffee, I'm actually not going to have my pie right now. But this graphic that I've been sharing, I just think is hysterical, because first of all, I'm not crazy about pumpkin pie, so just never mind that part of it. But I am crazy about whipped cream and that kind of stuff. So this just really tickled me. That's my idea of pie. So, but anyways, because I'm not crazy about pumpkin pie, I'm actually having pecan pie later. And I had to give a shout out to my Uncle Wayne, and may he rest in peace. He passed away a few years back, but he always called it pecan pie. So I'm having pecan pie for dessert. Tell me in comments what you're having for dessert. Are you a pumpkin pie fan? Are you a pecan pie fan? I'm sure there's a diehard apple pie base out there as well. So let's hear about your favorite dessert. Post a picture of your favorite spooky coffee cup, and let's have pie and coffee together. I do have a little squeak in my voice. I went out with some coworkers last night, like so many people did, and I was laughing and talking all night long, and I'm a little hoarse today, so don't mind me. But it is Thanksgiving, and you can't do a Thanksgiving anything without giving thanks. So, being Thanksgiving, I do want to take a moment and give thanks to some things, and not the least of which is anybody who does tune in and watch and help me build a base. So, thank you for that. I'm thankful that I can live stream. I love it so much. I think I'm halfway decent at it, and I think I'm getting better at it. I welcome your critiques, but please be kind. But I am thankful for this. This is kind of like my new hobby, and I really enjoy it. But I'm also thankful for God, I'm 61. I am thankful for my health. I'm thankful for my husband. I'm thankful for my marriage. I'm thankful for my mother is healthy. She's 81 and she's healthy. I'm thankful for the many, many, many good friendships that I have, the old friendships that I've had, and the new friendships that I'm making through gals. I can't state that enough. Boy, am I making some good new friends through gals. I could list it all list them all here, but I won't. You know who you are. Um, so I'm very, very grateful for that. Grateful for my family. I expect that Michelle is either tuned in now or may tune in tonight, and she's family. And not only am I thankful for all these things on this Thanksgiving, but like everybody else, I look back at Thanksgiving and I got to think of Thanksgiving's past. And for my family, I mean, I only have one brother. So as far as siblings go, my family is pretty small. But I do have 15 first cousins on one side. And then on the other side, I have 3 first cousins, but they're all boys and they're all older than me. So there might as well be 6 of them. You know what I mean? Um, but anyways, with 15 first cousins and 3 on one side and 3 on the other, and that means that there's all these sets of parents, and so there's lots of aunts and uncles. I would have to say that on a Thanksgiving at our house on Paul Street in Bristol, Connecticut, between 10:30 in the morning and 7 at night, we would see 40 to 50 people come through our house, whether people stopped by for coffee on their way to someplace else, or people came and sat down around our huge, huge dining room table. We had a huge dining room on Paul Street in Bristol, Connecticut. And I can see everybody. I could name all the people around that table. And then afterwards, all the people that came for pie and coffee or stopped by on their way here and there. So we always had like an open house. People just came and went all day long and into the night. And I remember that very, very fondly because it meant that you got to see everybody. It meant that you got to see everybody. It meant that you saw your 15 first cousins and all their aunts and all the aunts and uncles and friends of the family would come by and you know how it is. The holidays are a good reason to make you stop and reconnect with people that you haven't connected with throughout the year. It's if for no other reason they make you take pause and think of others. So anyway. So yeah, I'm just so grateful for the family Thanksgivings, and then as we got older, Thanksgivings would be with your, immediate family and in-laws, and then what you would do, you would go to Nanny and Pa's for pie and coffee. So you would see as the family got bigger. I mean, 15 first cousins and people getting married, and boyfriends, girlfriends, in-laws, etc. Like I said, you had that dinner part with other parts of your family. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we converged at Nanny and Pa's, and we had our pie and coffee there. Let's see, I've got no comments and I don't have any viewers right now, but I do hope some people tune in. If nobody tunes in to talk more about Thanksgiving, I am going to talk about folk horror because I thought Thanksgiving in New England kind of, anyways. So, anyways, back to what I was saying. So much to be thankful for. Health, no joke, boy, no joke. Thankful for health, thankful for family, thankful for friends, thankful for my job. I don't just have a regular job. I have real friendships where I work, and I'm very grateful for my job at Ladybug Pest Control. Very grateful for that. So yeah, I'm grateful for my dog Jack. I'm grateful for all the pets that I ever had. And I mean, the list could go on and on and on. I have a grateful heart, not just today. I try to be grateful in my actions throughout, but I am human and I am a sinner, but I do try to be grateful. So, well, looks like I don't have anybody joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and say a few things about gals. This is an 18 plus space. We are going to talk about some things that might be disturbing to some viewers. You all know what I like to say. I find it pretty disturbing that we're not more disturbed by the disturbing things that we view. And also today being Thanksgiving, smoke them if you got them. I don't have any viewers. I'm smoking. Pour yourself a glass of wine, a cup of coffee, crack a cold beer, sit back in your favorite chair, watch on your phone, or just listen. Just get comfortable and let's have a conversation. And like I said, smoke them if you got them. I don't have many viewers. I do not feel bad about that. I do hope that somebody does tune in. And don't mind me adjusting. My back is a little creaky. So yeah, so we are an 18 plus space, and smoke them if you got them, because I sure am. Please like, subscribe, share. I'm trying to build an algorithm, trying to get viewers. All right, so yeah, so I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about folk horror, and not about Thanksgiving. I'm not going to give a history of Thanksgiving. Anybody who's heard my live streams before know that I very cautiously dance around colonization conversations. I'm well aware of 1,000 things about colonization, but that's not what I want to talk about. Colonization happened, and we're going to talk about the things that happened after that happened. So, again, not trying to make a political statement one way or the other. Oh, my coffee is delicious. I hope your coffee is good tonight too. Hope that maybe the half the family's watching football. Maybe the kids are in the basement watching a movie. Maybe the cousins are out back smoking a joint. Well, that's how it was in my family. Anyways, yeah, so I think for me, the focus with Thanksgiving is American tradition. It's really the same thing with Christmas too, because I'm not really a Christian. I'm not a Christian, but I'm not a Christian. American tradition. My stepmother was Jewish, and she celebrated Christmas. So that's the kind of thing that I really wanted to focus on. Like I said, not talking about, who's right and wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about a kind of a subgenre of horror, literary and film horror, called folk horror. I first heard. Oh, wait, and before we go on, so listen, I'm going to post something. I hope somebody tunes in. If you guys post a picture of your favorite coffee cup in comments, and we'll vote whose cup we like, whoever cup we like will win one of these bags. And look at all the cool stuff that comes in the bag. There's 4 skeleton Christmas cards. There's some neat stickers, a disco ball ornament, ghost tag, a skeleton ornament, 2 black bows that are definitely gift quality, bracelet, a necklace, a change purse, and a raffle ticket. Oh, and that cute little bag. It all comes in that cute little bag, and I'll ship it out to you. And speaking of that, I've got Sonia, Sandy, and Andy. Your bags are going out this weekend. And Kathy Ferrara and Lisa Aubie, if you ever tune in and watch this, send me your addresses, because I got a bag for each of you too, just for being my fans, and for really helping support me during my live streams. So I'd like to send you guys each a bag too. But yeah, so if anybody can post a picture of their favorite coffee cup. This is Pie and Coffee on Thanksgiving. Post your favorite coffee cup, and whoever's favorite coffee cup we like the most favorite will win, again, one of these gift bags. Let me show it. One of these gift bags, and I'll ship it out to you this weekend. Okay. So I do hope to get some engagement on that. I'll post that again throughout the live stream. Oops. So I'm trying to drink my coffee, and it's very hot, very, very hot. So yeah, so folk horror. I thought, like I said, it was a good theme for Thanksgiving, because folk horror really has a lot to do with sociogeography, the people in the land and the ties between people and the land. It's complicated, and it's not complicated. It's really one of those funny things. And also, I want to say that some of the folk horror things that not only that I researched, that are some of these are some of my own personal favorite folk horror stories, books, movies. But interesting, a lot of them kind of tend to take place in Connecticut or lean towards Connecticut, and some of them have some weird cross references. I don't know. We'll talk about them. But yeah, so folk horror. Let's see. to define folk horror, it's a subgenre of horror. Something that would be folk horror, let's see, Dark Shadows would be folk horror. Okay, there's something I'm going to throw out there that most folks know about, Dark Shadows. Folk horror is usually takes place in a rural setting, a farm setting, away from a city, although we're going to talk about some folk horror that does take place in the city based on the next thing I'm going to say, and that's isolation. So we need a couple of things to happen for it to be folk horror, sometimes usually rural, definitely isolation from mainstream, isolation from family, isolation from population, isolation from socialization. Superstitions. Somewhere in folk horror, there's somebody who believes something different than what would be current or mainstream. There may be thoughts of a cursed location or talk of a cursed location. Again, think like Dark Shadows, or think lands that have been settled. I mean, we're talking a lot about New England, lands that have been settled for thousands of years, long before the white man got here, even before the Vikings. I believe the Vikings arrived here, but even long before that, these lands have been settled for a long time by people with alternative to what I maybe believe in mainstream beliefs. Okay. And also, for it to be folk horror, there should be an element of traditional beliefs, real focus on tradition, themes of old versus new. Again, there's that kind of tradition thing. There's usually a struggle between old versus new in folk horror, good versus evil, which I guess good versus evil is the crux of any good story, isn't it? Right? Conflict, two opposing forces brought together in a narration, causing a struggle, which is usually resolved. I learned that in 8th grade English with Mrs. Tucker. And last but not least, and this is my personal favorite, for something to be folk horror, there's got to be a certain tone to it. Tone as it applies to writing, not tone as it applies to audio. So an impending sense of doom, a building sense of dread through the storytelling, through the description of the geography, the building of tension through anticipation, knowing that a character is going to do something, and you're sitting back watching or reading, you're reading and you're going, no, don't, and you know full well they're going to do it. And then maybe you've read the book a second time or watched the movie again, and because you liked it so much and you know what they're going to do, and that anticipation still builds, and you know you've got a good folk horror story. And a lot of psychological and historical horror, as opposed to supernatural and gory, as opposed to ghosts and knives and stabbings and blood, that kind of thing. There, now my coffee's cooling off a little bit. So yeah, I do hope. I've seen a couple people pop in and then they popped back out. Please comment, drop a comment, let me know who's here. Show a picture of your favorite coffee cup and you could win a prize. So anyways, that's kind of the basic definition of folk horror. There's got to be a lot of elements to it to achieve kind of that definition. And then if you want to add gothic to it, the gothic part of it being romance and mystery. So you can have good folk horror and have it be gothic, and you can have good folk horror and have it not be gothic. So using kind of that definition of folk horror, I would like to strongly recommend, if anybody is interested in this gal's literary and cinematic referrals or recommendations, I strongly recommend this, Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, A History of Folk Horror. It's free on YouTube. I have a subscription to YouTube, so I watch it with no commercials on YouTube, but you can see it on YouTube. You may have to buy it on YouTube, but it is also on Prime, and it's on Prime with commercials, but that's no big deal. I will tell you this, it's very long. It is 3 hours long. but it's one of those things that it's a documentary, but it does have a lot of clips of a lot of cool old movies, a lot of English horror. But for our purposes, we're going to be talking more about New England. But again, this really taught me what folk horror was, and I realized that in of all the horror genre, I'm really a fan of folk horror. I've always been a fan of folk horror. And if you think in general terms of folk horror, think of those great horror movies that were produced in the 70s that came out of England that you used to be able to catch on Saturday nights at midnight. You'd come in from the bar and be, half in the bag and sit back on the couch with your pajamas on and drink one last beer and smoke one last joint before bed and catch one of these great English horror movies. And those really kind of captured that kind of feeling. So I think that's the movies I'm going to talk about. Interesting. The movies and the books that I'm going to talk about, and this is my making this connection for the first time, they're pretty much from the 70s as well. So I think the 70s really nailed it with folk horrors. If you do watch this documentary, it goes a little further back as well. And I think there's something about Christmas, the horror stories for Christmas that's English that I would really, really like to read and see some movies about, and know a little more about. They look very frightening and very entertaining. And I have to admit, since I've always been a fan of horror movies and that kind of thing, but since I've been doing like paranormal investigating, uh, fictional horror movies just don't really flip my switch anymore. I don't know. So anyway, so that's why I'm kind of, I guess, going back to my roots, some of my real favorites. And a couple of these you might find interesting to note is that a couple of these I actually read as English assignments in high school. Two of these, one short story and one novel. But anyways, and we'll get into that in a minute. So we're talking about folk horror. Think Stephen King, think older Stephen King. Here we go, talking about that 70s theme again. And like I said, I don't think I even really thought of that in my research. I gotta adjust my chair. Oh, oops, sorry about that. Sorry about that, guys. But even the older Stephen King stuff came out in the 70s. So again, there for me personally, I didn't find that in research anywhere. I didn't see that anywhere. That's my own personal opinion that the 70s really nailed it with folk horror. And I would love to hear anybody else's opinion. I'm 22 minutes in and I've only seen 2 viewers. So I do hope somebody joins me because I think this is some really fun content and I would love to hear what other people think. And I do hope that you're enjoying your Thanksgiving. And if you are watching at a later time, I really appreciate that. And you can still comment and share if you are watching at a later time. Thank you. So, anyways, yeah, back to what I was saying. Stephen King with some real serious folk horror. Let's talk about Pet Cemetery. Okay, how about the we just went down that punch list of folk horror: isolation, rural, rural. First location, it was Micmac Indian burial ground. There was an ancient pet cemetery. There was a current pet cemetery. So, and there was focused on tradition. There were old good versus evil, an impending sense of dread. If you ever read that story, I won't give it away, but I'll tell you what. You read a scene about a little 3-year-old running down a front yard and Stephen King builds that tension and you know what's coming, and it's just that impending sense of and that's not paranormal. That's not paranormal. So, but again, and it's very rural. It's set in Maine, kind of in the country in Maine. A lot of these stories you will find take somebody from a current modern day city, say New York City, Boston. I think Stephen King, a lot of his folks go Boston to Maine or Maine, Boston, back to Maine. So that you'll find that, I don't know, what was I even saying about that? That you end up with that city versus rural. Again, I mean, really, these themes are very prevalent. I think once they're pointed out to you, you're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh, look at how literary I'm being. Look at these things I'm learning from Gals, Ghosts, and Ladies about folk horror. And I would love to know what you think about it. So yeah, get Pet Cemetery, a family from the city. The doctor and his wife moved to the country in Maine, and all these weird things happen. Definitely paranormal themed. There's that too. There's no denying that. It's not just the folk horror part of it. But again, you could just like, oh, that Pet Cemetery, I could go. Rural, isolation from mainstream, superstitious, cursed association, long-standing inhabited, the Indians were there, blah, 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 blah. You go right down this punch list. Yep, that's folk horror. As well as, other types of horror, psychological horror. Children of the Corn, another Stephen King story. Folk horror, another story of people coming from a city situation. There's I believe a Boston situation. I think they're coming from Boston or visiting his sister in Boston or something. But then, and they're driving their way across country, and they're driving through corn country. I'm not sure what state. I want to say Iowa, but boy, am I not sure about that. I mean, Iowa because of Villisca. But again, you've got city people transplanting or city people finding themselves in a rural, isolated, superstitious, long inhabited community with very old traditions versus new. I just think it's interesting. Like I said, once you find out these things, it's like, oh, it all kind of makes sense. I took a class in my senior year of high school called short story, and I loved it so much. We would read things by O. Henry and Ernest Hemingway and all kinds of great short stories, and we would analyze them. And it got to the point where I could read a short story and go, oh, foreshadowing, red herring, and this, that, and the other thing. And so I really groove on this kind of stuff. I am definitely I'm not a literary geek. I'm not as literary as I wish I were. But this really intrigued me. It all started when I watched this, and it really put a name to that kind of genre that I called 70s horror. So it all started for me that watching that. And again, it's like I said, it's long. It's 3 hours long. Put it on in the background and listen to it. I get something different out of it every time, but I really learned a lot, and it really piqued my interest. And I learned there's a lot more out there that I want to see and watch and learn about. Oh, but one of the stories it talks about, classic folk horror, would be The Wicker Man. And there are two versions of The Wicker Man. We've got the classic version that's got I don't know what's his name and what's his name and what's her name. Did not jot that shit down, and I apologize for that. But I've seen it. There's a classic version, and it's excellent. It is excellent. And then there's a current version with Nicolas Cage, and that was also not bad. I think for myself, I watched the first one with Nicolas Cage, and it was so not bad that I made it a point to seek out the original and watch the original. Rural and isolated. The Wicker Man takes place on an island, and in the remake with Nicolas Cage that takes place in modern times, because it is on a remote island, there's no cell phone service, so it's isolated. There are many superstitions. They are pagans. There's a mystery. They're lying about a missing child to have a police person come from the mainland and investigate. And all the while, it was a ruse to get this policeman there. I won't give much more away. I highly recommend watching Wicker Man. If there's a book, probably a little better, read that. But Wicker Man could just go check right down, long-standing values, inhabited forever and ever and ever. The old versus new, the cop, the police officer coming from modern times into this isolated community that doesn't know about TV and electricity and all the other kind of stuff. Not only that, the police officers coming from the mainland, coming from a modern day Christianity probably Catholicism. I know in the original Wicker Man, it's Catholicism because he's a virgin and he's engaged and he's vowed, and that's a big important part of it because he's going to be a sacrifice. And what do you sacrifice? Virgins. So, but anyways, his modern Christianity and he goes to this island and they worship very differently. They worship the old gods. They sacrifice. They make sacrifices to guarantee good crops. So the old ways and the new ways at odds, big city and isolated island. I mean, I feel like I'm teaching a class. I hope somebody watches this and lets me know what you think. I think it's fascinating. And I did the research on this. So if there are any mistakes, they're all mine. I am my own research assistant. I apologize for any research errors. But things really clicked when I put that list together of what folk horror combined this list. It really started making sense to me to combine it with some of my favorite or books. So I guess, like I said, I'm really a fan of folk horror. I hope you are as well. I would love to hear from anybody watching. I'm talking 31 minutes and 12 seconds and only had a couple of viewers. So yeah, we were saying Stephen King. Oh, and I do have notes, only one page of notes, because I'm talking about like books and movies that I really like. And I'm going to do my best not to give spoilers, but these are some things that I really recommend. Misery, another one. There's some folk horror elements to that, and some gothic too. There's a little romance in there. There's a little, whether you like it or not. But huge on the psychological horror scale and 0 on the paranormal. There's no paranormal in Misery, and that was one of Stephen King's most terrifying reads. Most terrifying. So anyways, so I'm going to talk, I'm talk about, one of the ones that I read in English class in high school. Come on, guys. Who else read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson? Anybody? Bueller? Seriously, anybody read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson? I just put my little heater on. Well, that's a really good, now we're talking about folk horror, and I said many things take place in Connecticut, but I initially, let's kind of trickle this down. Thanksgiving, New England. I said a lot of things take place in Connecticut. The Lottery does take place in the fictional town of North Bennington, Vermont. I believe it's a fictional town. If it's real, my sincere apologies to the folks in North Bennington, who no doubt know the story from Shirley Jackson of The Lottery, but that is folk horror. Oh my God, the old ways versus the new ways. It takes place in fairly modern times, and there's no paranormal in this story. The buildup, Shirley Jackson wrote one of the haunted house stories, The House on Haunted Hill. Was that a Shirley Jackson? And she wrote a couple of other gothic stories, but The Lottery being the one, in my opinion, that falls under folk horror the most, because it's an isolated rural community, fairly modern day. Everybody in the community is getting ready for this picnic. Everybody is so nervous. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Oh, don't worry, everybody will be fine. Everybody will be fine. Don't worry. But you do have to enter the lottery. Everybody's going to enter this lottery, and it builds up, and you don't know what the lottery is for. And as the story goes on, spoiler alert for the lottery, I am going to say what happens. So everybody goes to the picnic, the whole town, and the lottery is drawn. One resident is picked. For what? To be stoned to death by the other people in the community. A sacrifice to the gods. That's what The Lottery is about by Shirley Jackson. It's a short story, and Shirley Jackson is a brilliant author. I recommend anything by her. She's great. Curl up with a good book by a fireplace with a Shirley Jackson book. You will not be disappointed, especially on a dark, stormy night. But The Lottery is a really good, I don't know, kind of like for what we're talking about, like Stephen King, a good kind of introduction, entry level into folk horror. You've got this isolated rural community that's in fairly modern times, but they are drawing on this very pagan, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but pagan ritual of sacrifice to the gods, not God, but to the gods. That's, long standing and traditional for there to be more than one God, so that they have a good harvest next year, or so that they have a better year next year. So that is pretty darn well folk horror, if you ask me. And I just want to remind folks where we are coming from. We are coming at you. Let's see. We are live tonight from Lizzie Lou Studios, having coffee and pie on this Thanksgiving. We do hope that you are enjoying the show. Please post a picture of your favorite coffee cup, because you just might win a prize tonight. We are definitely giving away. What are we giving away? This. We're giving away this to the vote for the best coffee cup. And the raffle ticket, you see that raffle ticket there? That is to win a very creepy doll head REM pod, brand new, very creepy doll head REM pod. All right, so let's get back to business. Excuse me, coffee down the wrong pipe. So yeah, so we are live from Lizzie Lou Studios, and thank you again for joining us. We're talking tonight about folk horror. I thought that some New England folk horror would be a really good kind of a good topic for Thanksgiving without delving into colonization. However, speaking of colonization, if you are interested in colonization, back to this Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, a history of folk horror, there is a very interesting segment on colonization in there, especially from an Australian perspective. So I think they just had their bicentennial a few years back. And it's interesting. I recommend it. I'm not going to talk about it here, but I do recommend it. So all right. Well, I said The Lottery, and then now the next one. The next one I'm going to talk about is probably one of my all-time favorite books that I ever read in my life. And that would be this. And I read it first in high school, and that is The Other by Thomas Tryon, which is not to be confused with The Others with Nicole Kidman, the movie. No, not The Others, which I thoroughly enjoyed and thought it was a very unique take on the ghost story. I loved The Others, but that's not what this is. This is The Other. You have never read a novel like this one by Thomas Tryon, and it's been 6 months on the New York bestseller list, I would say in 1972. So here we are with the 70s horror story. I do want to mention about Shirley Jackson. She was before the 70s, I think maybe the 50s. Maybe that's what I'm guessing on Shirley Jackson, and I apologize for not knowing. Totally my fault. Shame on my research assistant, who is me. I'm gonna fire that girl. No, I'm not. I really need her. So The Other by Thomas Tryon, and that is a really good study in folk horror. The Other takes place in a very rural setting. This story takes place in Connecticut. Maybe not so much city ways meaning rural ways, but maybe there's kind of what you've got here is the end of an era, the end of a farm. This family had a farm. The farm is over, and and now people don't work on the farm. They go out to work at the Pepsi-Cola plant in Hartford. So there's that kind of still kind of a butting of the heads of the old ways and the new ways, but in a little bit of a different sense. rather than outsiders. Well, there are some outsiders here. There are some outsiders here. So I'm going to give a lot of spoilers about the other. And if you are watching and you don't want me to, I won't. But since there's nobody here to talk about it, I'll do my best not to give spoilers. I can hear my dog barking. My husband's downstairs. He'll take care of him. So the other, written by Thomas Tryon, takes place in the fictional town of Pequot Landing in Connecticut. And it's the Perry family. And their family crest is the peregrine falcon, peregrine for Perry. And the family has a ring of a peregrine falcon, and this ring figures prominently throughout the story. This ring does. So this farm, this now non-farming farm, but still with a few old roosters and non-laying hens and a pond that the kids could still fish in, and still an old barn. But it wasn't an active farm anymore, and it used to be an onion farm, and the Granddaddy Perry was known as the Onion King of Pequot's Landing. That's a quote from the book. So the story, takes place, I think, in the 30s and 40s in Connecticut, and it's about twin boys who are about 12 years old. And so Granddaddy Perry would have been their grandfather. He would have been the Onion King, but he had passed away. And so, when things happened, so Granddaddy Perry passed away, and then Niles and Holland, the twins, their father, I guess, tried to make a go of the farm, and it didn't work, and then the father died under mysterious circumstances. So, and the ring went from Granddaddy Perry to the father Perry, who died under mysterious circumstances, to somehow Niles ends up with this ring after these people are long gone. So it's very interesting. So, but yeah, there's two twins, Niles and Holland. And of course, if you're going to have a folk horror story about twins, it's going to be one is good and one is bad. One is nice, one is evil. And the story really plays out slow, like molasses, to the point that it's excruciating. It's sweet. It's so excruciating. It's sweet. Any of my literary pals out there, Jennifer Dowd, Kate, if you're watching, oops, and there goes, sorry about that, knocked my microphone over again. But any of my literary friends know that buildup of that tension is just so incredible. So there, we're talking about tone now in folk horror, but you've got this buildup of tension. There's nothing paranormal in the other. You've got good versus evil. Can everybody hear and see me all right? Because now I've knocked over my microphone and I probably screwed everything up. No, everything seems to look fine. So anyway, so the other does kind of encompass all these things, traditional values, old versus new. The old ways are gone and the new ways are coming, and the new ways, they may be being bucked. There's a character, the old ways. In the other, there's a grandmother character, and she's Russian, and it's an actress, Uta Hagen, and she's also in The Boys from Brazil, which is another favorite, I don't know, horror story of mine. It's actually on my list only because I've got Ira Levin to talk about, and he's got The Stepford Wives, which is folk horror, believe it or not. And here comes Nicole Kidman's name. I said earlier, there's just so many weird parallels. I'm going to talk about The Stepford Wives, and not the one with Nicole Kidman, and not even the one with Susan Ross. I'm going to talk about the book if I have time, because geez, I've already been talking for 45 minutes. So, but with the other, it's the buildup of tension and the things that you see coming, and the foreshadowing, and the things The Other was not meant to be read. The Other was meant to be reread and reread and reread and reread. And I love it. I listen to it on audio. I love reading it. You'll get something different out of it every time, even though you know what's going to happen. And you're like, no, can't be. I don't believe it. Don't do it. And all these things, that apprehension in you builds because he tells this Thomas Tryon tells such a good story and he scares the pants off of you. So this book, The Other, spent 6 months on the New York Times bestseller list, and then they made a movie out of it. And the screenplay was also written by Thomas Tryon. I think it was a television movie. I don't think it was in the movies. I think it was a television movie, but it is extremely true to the book. One of the best. Come on, guys and gals, I'm 61 years old. This is literally one of the best film adaptations of a book that this gal has ever seen. And why? Because it was written by Thomas Tryon. It was because the guy that wrote the book wrote the screenplay. And if I'm not mistaken, he may even have directed it. So he was really able to capture the nuances in the book, the tones in the book, in the film. And if he didn't direct it, I do apologize. I should know that shit. I'll tell you, it's really hard to find The Other streaming anywhere. Like you can't even buy or rent it because every now and then I'm in the mood to watch it. I would pay $5 to rent it for 24 hours, but it's very, very hard to find. But I'm going to show this again. I highly recommend this book if you are looking for a good, scary story. And the other thing about it is you really need to pay attention to this story. There's one line in this story that brings it all together. And if you miss that one line in this story, you're going to get to the end and go, what did I miss? What did I miss? You have to pay very, very close attention. That being said, it's not a long novel. It's not long, and the story does move along. So, but the grandmother, we're talking about folk horror, or the old ways. The grandmother is from they call her Ada. And the character's name is Ada Badrenia, and she's the mother's mother. And the mother, after the father died, the mother's taken to a separate wing, like over the carriage house, and she secretly drinks up there, and it's not so much of a secret. And that was really something for a woman to be an alcoholic in the 30s and 40s, not so good, Well, it's never so good, but you know what I mean. Different time periods, things were looked on differently, but everybody knew it was an open secret for them. But Ada and the grandsons used to play the game, and that was where they would almost like self-hypnotize. And she could talk. Niles, Holland couldn't really get into it so much. Niles, she could talk him into find a bird overhead and envisioning that you're that bird and you look down below and you see everything, and they called it the game, and they played it, and they eventually one of the twins, because there goes that microphone again. Like I said, it's my large, it's these. Sorry. But it's that one of the one twin Niles that does it and does it for not so good purposes, although he doesn't think so. So I don't want to give too much more away about that, but I highly recommend if you're looking for a good read, gals. I should have come up with some kind of gals. I give this 5 gals, 5 G's for The Other. for really fitting the bill for folk horror, and also for being a really great read. You could read it in a weekend. If you started on a Friday night, you'd be done with it Sunday before bed, and you would be saying, I can't wait to go back and read this again. It's some really good folk horror. It takes place in Connecticut. And Thomas Tryon really gives some really good descriptors of the farm, and you really get a sense that you're on this rolling farm. And when he talks about fishing at the pond, you see the cattails, and he's very, very good writer. He also wrote a couple other things. One of them called Harvest Home, which also took place in Connecticut, which is also folk horror. And the movie Harvest Home starred Betty Davis, and Patricia Arquette was also in it, and probably a couple other famous people, but most famously then Patricia Arquette was just a teenager. She played a teenager in that movie. She was just a kid. But that was also about the old ways versus the new ways. Also recommend, although it wasn't his best book and his best movie, they were still very good, and they were both, the movie and the book of Harvest Home, are really good examples of folk horror. If you're interested in that kind of thing, I highly recommend. So I also want to talk about the Stepford Wives. Ira Levin, or Levin. I always said Lemon, so that's what I'm going to say. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. Mr. Levin or Levin. The Stepford Wives. Absolutely, positively folk horror. The Stepford Wives takes place in Connecticut. And again, not the Nicole Kidman version. So I was talking about a book called The Other, not The Others, which is the Nicole Kidman movie. Not that, which was good, but The Other by Thomas Tryon. But now I'm talking about Ira Levin, and boy, what do I got? 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 of his books here. Well, he's got a lot more than this. So many more, because he's also written, I think he wrote Drat the Cat. He wrote A Kiss Before Dying. So many things. Look, he wrote Rosemary's Baby. That's also, you know what? I would say that fits folk horror, other than it's not rural. It does take place in New York City in the Dakota. The same building that John Lennon was shot in, the Dakota, although it's called the Bramford in the novel and the movie, which, by the way, was directed by Roman Polanski. Anyways, and Ruth Gordon's from Quincy, where I live. I live down the street from the Ruth Gordon Amphitheater, and she won an Academy Award for playing a character in that movie. Minnie Castevet was the name of the character. Anyways, but in Rosemary's Baby, it does take place in New York City, but isolation happens. Extreme isolation happens. And then all the other things: superstitions, cursed location, inhabited location, traditional values, focus on tradition, themes of old versus new, good versus evil, a sense of dread, the building of tension, the anticipation, the unbelievable buy-in when she says, this is no dream, this is really happening. So now Rosemary's Baby does have paranormal horror, but it's also a study in excruciating psychological horror. Excruciating. I mean, in the end, they don't show you the baby. That's psychological horror, and you know that baby's father is the devil, so that's some really good psychological horror. The dream sequences in Rosemary's Baby are really good psychological horror. The scene with where the demon has its way with her is extreme psychological and paranormal, but psychological horror as well. So Rosemary's Baby really does fit those things, even though it's not a rural environment. But you do have the Stepford Wives from Ira Levin, and that is absolutely the classic. Well, I guess the movie with Nicole Kidman would count too, but but I'm really talking about the book. But it's the classic, the kind of the New York City people leaving an apartment, going to rural Connecticut. They bought a house in rural Connecticut, the American dream. So they went from the hustle and bustle of city life to a rural Connecticut town, which actually, the town is old, but it's inhabited with fairly new people. But it's new people who are determined to keep the old ways. So they use the men's club in town for very nefarious motives. Ira Levin does not write a good conspiracy theory story. Ira Levin writes a good conspiracy story because when you start getting suspicious, going, what do I think is going on? Something weird's going on. And it's not a theory. You're like, holy shit, this, like Rosemary said, this is no dream. This is really happening. It is not conspiracy theory. It is conspiracy. So the Stepford Wives was a really good example of all of that. Again, traditional value themes, and them, the excuse me, the men and the men's club not allowing women, because what they were doing at the men's club was creating women who were 50s, perfectly shaped Susie homemaker. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I spent some time being a housewife. I was very fortunate to not have to work for 2 years, and I would love to not have to work for 2 years again and spend time being a housewife. I really loved it, but I worked because I have to. But it was a little more than that. It was a little more extreme than that, but it was just a buildup of suspicion. You've got the main character in the movie. It's Susan Ross. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember her name. But she starts suspecting something nefarious is going on, and she's right. She's right. In this community that's got traditional values, that's rural, that's isolated, that's got old and new values kind of clashing. So I think that I have spent the last 56 minutes and 51 seconds talking to you about folk horror, and I hope if you watched, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I've given you a good definition of folk horror as it applies to some New England stories. I've tried to give you some of my favorite recommendations of New England folk horror, and outside of New England, Rosemary's Babies, New York. I wanted to get to the Boys from Brazil, but I have been talking for an hour. Boys from Brazil, not necessarily folk horror, but really good horror by Ira Levin, really, really good. But also with Uta Hagen in it, who was also in The Other, who, by the way, Uta Hagen, this actress who was in these two movies, was also a famous acting teacher. She taught many, many great actors. So a lot of tie-ins here, a lot of tie-ins. So I would recommend any of these stories that I told you about. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, anything here. Oh, also, if you see you've got Rosemary's Baby and you also see Son of Rosemary, which is not to be confused with, boy, that's the buzzword of the day. It's not to be confused with the movie Look What Happened to Rosemary's Baby, which came out like 2 years after the original movie and was crazy. It was just Patty Duke just crying. It was awful. I do not recommend. What I do recommend is Son of Rosemary, which came out a few years back, in the last 15 to 20 years, written by Ira Levin, and I thought gave a very good resolution to things. I really liked it a lot. I really liked it, so I do recommend it. But I also want to recommend this again, Woodland Dark and Days Bewitched, A History of Folk Horror. It is a documentary. It's on YouTube and it's on Amazon Prime. And it's a really good starting place if you're interested in either literary or cinematic folk horror, which is really just the coolest little niche subgenre of horror and gothic. And like I said, I think I've kind of weaved a thread of some themes of some 70s movies and some 70s books and some 70s authors and some 70s stories that really captured that kind of folk horror theme that we talked about, the rural isolation, good versus evil, traditional, long inhabited landscapes where people have lived for years, themes of old versus new, a lot of old versus new, city folk, old folk, not old folk, but you know what I mean, the city folk, folks that are not city folk, country folk. That's the word, country folk. There you go. And again, psychological and historical horror as opposed to paranormal, although there's definitely a paranormal element in a lot of these and in a lot of those 70s folk horror movies that came out of England, a lot of witches and witchcraft. And you'll see this is also a great place to learn about witches and witchcraft and why they're so feared, and so many things to learn from Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. I highly recommend it. Yeah, I'm going to wrap things up. It's been over an hour. I recommend reading the other. I give it 5 ghosts, 5 gals. I give this 5 gals, and I give everything on here 5 gals. And nobody posted a picture of their favorite mug, so we don't have any winners tonight. If I will monitor comments over the next 24 hours, if anybody does comment, the first person to comment will win a bag. And Kathy Ferrara and Lisa Aubie, send me your addresses because you are getting a bag, complimentary for being supporters. And I hope everybody is enjoying their pie and their coffee. And thank you so much for joining us on Gals on this Thanksgiving of 2025. And don't forget to listen to Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And I'm going to play my outro and end stream. I will not be home Saturday night, so I'm going to drop a rerun. I do hope you watch. Let me know what you'd like to see, and that's the one that I'll rerun. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.